Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of Casual Conversations. Today, I have with me Mr. Ronit Joy, who is an advocate at the Gujarat High Court. Now, it is my fortune that I know Mr. Ronit Joy as a friend and as a mentor, as a senior who has always guided me throughout my short span of legal career. Today, I have him talking on a very important topic of law, which is seldom dealt in the law schools, that is quashing of FIR and quashing of proceedings in criminal matters. So, obviously, the theoretical framework of it is something that is not covered in this lecture. So, I assume that all of you know that quashing flows through Section 482 of CRPC, wherein the inherent powers of the High Court is given. But the practical aspects of quashing is something that I have invited Mr. Ronit Joy to deliver and deliberate upon today with me. So, over to Mr. Ronit.
Yes, hi. Good evening, Alokik. Am I
Good
audible?
evening. Yeah, you are audible. Yes.
Correct. So I exclusively practice before the Gujarat High Court, and the topic which Alokik has asked me to speak on is very relevant and it's very interesting in the field of litigation, especially if you have an inkling towards the criminal side. If the criminal side fascinates you, and why is quashing important, and what exactly is quashing of an FIR? So the first information report we've all studied in law school, right? Theory. That in theory, what is an FIR? An FIR sets the criminal law, criminal justice system in motion, right? It is how the process begins. The complainant or the first informant approaches the police, files a complaint, which is then converted into an FIR, which is then registered into an FIR, and then the police investigate, which then culminates into a report, and then there is trial. So now quashing is that the FIR itself is negated, it is cancelled, whatever the term that is, whatever the term one deems it fit to be used, right? The case goes in its entirety. The case completely goes against the accused person or the applicant. So now, as I told you, throughout the country, different courts have different practices. So, for example, at the High Court of Gujarat, there are two ways you can prefer a quashing petition. The first is, as Alokik mentioned at the beginning, is under Section 482. We all have read 482 in law school, which is the inherent power of the High Court to prevent abuse of process of law or in the interest of justice, right? Inherent power, absolutely very wide power. 482 CRPC. So in the Gujarat High Court, there's something known as a CRMA, a Criminal Miscellaneous Application, wherein you file the petition and the provision of law is Section 482 of the CRPC, inherent power of the High Court. But in different states, for example in Bombay, or for example in Kerala for that matter, and even in Gujarat, people also do file a writ petition under 226, read with perhaps Section 482 of CRPC, and that is a special criminal application. At least that is what the nomenclature is in the Gujarat High Court. So you have two ways of going about it. Either you prefer a 482 application or you prefer a 226 read with a 482. In my opinion, that is always better because wider power, right? It is always better to come with a writ petition under 226. So this is how you go about it. And what exactly is quashing? What is the approach which has been taken by the writ courts? The writ courts are courts which can issue writs, which is the High Court and the Apex Court. You can't prefer a quashing petition before the learned courts below, before the Court of Sessions or the Magistrate Court. It is only the writ courts, the High Court and the Honorable Supreme Court. So, in your third or fourth year, whenever you have had a brush with criminal law in law school, everyone has said that the law with regards to quashing has been laid down in Bhajan Lal's case, or all the cases, the successive cases that have been followed by all the courts, where a consistent view has been taken. And what is it that we've been taught? That on reading or on a bare perusal of the first information report of the FIR, if all the allegations mentioned in the FIR by the first informant are taken at face value, are taken as it is, and even then no offense is made out, then the courts have the liberty to quash the FIR, which is what we have been taught. Am I right, Alokit? Is this what was your impression as well?
Yeah, correct. The theoretical frameworks goes about it. Yeah.
Correct. So that is what we have been taught, that you read the FIR in its entirety,
Hmm.
accept the allegations in the FIR as they are, without using your own brain or without adding something to it or without taking out something from the FIR. Accept the allegations as they are. And even then, if no offense is made out, then a caution petition would lie. This is what we've been taught in law school. And rightly so, rightly so. But it's not as simple as it sounds. So there are various gray areas in this definition of caution. So what do I mean by that? So first, let us understand what does this, whatever it is that we have learned, what does it actually mean? So let me give examples, because case laws are something which you will all read day in and day out. You can always Google it out. I'm going to speak from experience from some of the cases which I had the opportunity to appear before the Honorable High Court of Gujarat. Caution matters. So, for example, very recently during this pandemic, Corona, the number of positive cases in Gujarat is considerably rising on a day-to-day basis. So one of the journalists wrote an article stating that the cases in Gujarat are increasing by the day, and the government has failed to control it or curb it. And as a result, there are rumors that there is going to be a change of leadership in the state of Gujarat. What he exactly meant was there's a possibility that the Chief Minister, the Honorable Chief Minister of Gujarat, there may be a change in the guard, and the party in Delhi, the central government has taken note of this, and it is a very good likelihood. So what happens is this article was published on the 7th, and mind you, it was not one journalist who published this article. There were many journalists who gave articles both online as well as offline, in print, in hard copy, but more or less on the same line, that there are talks that the Honorable Chief Minister may be asked to resign and someone else from the center may replace it. So after this was published on the 7th, then on 11th, an FIR came to be registered by the investigating agency, State of Gujarat, under section 124A, which is sedition. Right? So we've all seen what has been happening in this country from in the very recent past 4 or 5 years, whether it is Kanhaiya or whether it is Hardik Patel, and everyone whoever has voiced their opinion against the present regime, at some point or the other, 124A, a case of 124A has been slapped on these people, rightly or wrongly. And we preferred a caution application for this journalist before the Honorable High Court. And it was our case that under 124A, it is the mandate of the section itself which clearly states that, and we also relied on some judgment, which clearly states that in order to attract 124A, the tendency to incite violence or to create public disorder is a must. So I may say something which is inflammatory. I may positively criticize the government. Again, there are judgments which say that criticism of the ruling government is the hallmark of democracy, right? So only if you, and that forces the government to mend its ways and to take corrective action. So fair criticism of the government, or for that matter, voicing your dissent with the opinions or the policies which the government has enforced, would never tantamount to inviting prosecution under section 124A. So we immediately moved the caution petition under 226 of the Constitution, 482 CRPC, on the ground that, first of all, whatever the man had published, the petitioner, was purely speculative. So affairs of the government is always a result of conjectures and surmises, right? The political activities or the political movements in every state, whatever is happening, it is all based to speculation. No one knows for sure as to when does someone get replaced, when does someone resign, or whatever it is. And all that person has said is that the number of cases, the COVID-19 positive patients are increasing day by day, and it clearly feels that the state government has failed in curbing this particular pandemic. What is wrong in that? And the learned public prosecutor, before when the hearing was taking place, argued that this is disloyalty towards the government. He has not dealt with measures, or he has not shown the measures that have been taken by the government in failing to tackle the menace. It was our argument, assuming for the sake of argument that he has criticized or whatever it is that he has done. There was no intention on his part to incite violence. If you contrast this with Hardik Patel's case in 2015 in Gujarat, where he said that no person from his community must die, but the police officers must be killed. So that is an inflammatory statement, right? You're inciting violence. You are telling people that it's okay to kill people, it's okay to take lives of these police officers for whatever reason that he had in mind. And there he had referred a caution application which came to be rejected by the High Court. The matter is now pending before the Supreme Court. So that's what it is. So coming back to where I started, so assuming that all the allegations in the FIR are sedition, read as they are, as it is, even when no offense is made out, because the section 124A, if you read 124A, it is very clear. There should be a tendency to incite violence or create public disorder, which was absent in my client's case, right? So if you want to read up about sedition, you can start from Bal Gangadhar's case, which is the case pre-independence. The first case post-independence was Kedarnath's case. And when the law regarding sedition has always been narrowed down, the scope, the ambit. So for example, in Gangadhar's case pre-independence, it was stated that you speak anything against the government, it falls under the ambit of sedition, which was then diluted, rightly so. And the definition has been narrowed down today. So that is what it means when you say that if you read the FIR in its entirety, even when no offense is made out, then the petition deserves to be quashed. This is what it is. But there are exceptions. And again, that is what is the important part. If there's something that you can take from this lecture or discussion rather, and that is, so for example, I had done a case and we see this day in and day out. Let us talk about sexual intercourse. Let us talk about rape. Okay. So there was a particular case wherein the complainant, the first informant, was the father of a girl who was admittedly a minor, who had sexual intercourse with a man by mutual consent. And this is very common. It actually happened. So the father then filed an FIR. An FIR came to be registered, and on the charges of rape against her lover or whoever it was, that particular boy. And so since both are minors, it is rape. Legally, it is rape, because if you have sex with a female under the age of 18, it is rape. And we immediately referred a quashing petition. And it came to be quashed. The quashing petition was allowed. Now, this is interesting because this is something known as, at least over here in the Gujarat High Court, we call it a consent quashing petition. So what happens is the complainant or the first informant gives an affidavit, places an affidavit on record stating that he or she has either settled the matter or has no objection if the FIR comes to be quashed, if the FIR is quashed. So again, so here, now relating it to the theory that we spoke about earlier, that you read all the allegations in the FIR in its entirety, and even then if no offense is made out, only then does the FIR come to be quashed. But now look at this case, which I just spoke to you with. Here, an offense has been committed. It must have been consensual. There's no doubt about that. But the fact that the girl was a minor means that the law of the land has been violated. The offense of rape has indeed been committed. But still, the girl wished to get married with this boy. And she was present before the court, before the honorable judge, before the learned judge, and made a statement that I wish to get married with him. What is the point if he has to face trial tomorrow? And this is her affidavit, which she said she's made it voluntarily and she swore on oath that she wishes to get married. So at the very first instance, the petition was not allowed. So what the judge did was waited for this girl to become a major and then suggested that the parties actually do get married. So they got married, their marriage was registered, they came with the certificate that was placed on record of the court, and the FIR came to be quashed. Now, on similar set of facts, there was a different case on the similar set of facts where the FIR was not quashed. The learned judge said, rightly so, they wish to get married now, but I'm not inclined to quash this petition. So again, there is that discretion which comes in, because there's no definitive answer to this conundrum, right? Because if you look at it legally, an offense has been committed. So then the justification would be, why should a person quash such an FIR? Where it is very clear that an offense has indeed come to be committed. On the other hand, some may argue that the purpose of trial is frustrated because we all know what the outcome of the trial is going to be, either which way, that the complaint itself has turned hostile. Correct? So these are two ways of looking about it. Another interesting case was wherein a very reputed doctor from the state of Gujarat wrote an article wherein he stated that many people place their faith at the Ajmer Sharif and they make wishes over there. And these wishes, they do turn out to be true, and they think, these believers, they think that whatever has happened in their life was a result of them going there and making their wish. Now, this person belongs to the Rationalist Society of India and is part of various groups whose main objective is to remove superstitious beliefs and blind faith from people in the society at large. And as a result of such activities which he has undertaken, a step towards people not believing in superstition was this article, which was culminated in this article. And he said that I sincerely believe that if someone buries my shoe, you make a cover or you make a grave of my shoe and make a wish before such a grave or before such a tomb, which has my shoe inside that grave on one hand, and you make a wish before any organization, before any religious place of worship, the chances of success are going to be the same. So what he was trying to say was, it doesn't matter if something has to happen, it will happen. Correct? If something is not going to happen, it's not going to happen. All that the person was trying to say was, you placing your belief in some higher dimensional power and thinking that by making a wish or by putting money or whatever it is, that wish is coming true, and coincidentally that wish indeed comes true, doesn't mean that it is because of some higher influence or whatever it is. It was going to be true either which way. So he was just trying to draw a comparison. An educative video, and sorry, it was not an article, it was a video, it was a 2-minute clip. And immediately some fundamental people in the fundamentalists and extremists in the society immediately submitted a complaint, basis which an FI came to the register for 295A and 298 of the IPC. Both are very interesting. So 295A is to do any act or action which either insults a particular person or his beliefs in religion or whatever it is. So again, he preferred a quashing petition, saying that the ingredients are not made out. One of the most important ingredients is the intention. The intention must be there to insult. It was our case. This is a man. This is not a one-off occurrence. He has been doing it from decades, 20 to 30 years. He's been doing this. So his duty, his intention was to create awareness among people. His intention was not that people pelt stones or overthrow or topple these religious institutions. His intention was very clear that people must not waste their time in these activities and focus your energies on something more positive and creative. Correct? This is what his intention was. So, uh, unfortunately, for our client, the judge was not inclined. The learned judge was not inclined, and so that petition came to be withdrawn. I'm sorry, the charge sheet came to be filed, and then we withdrew the application with a liberty to approach the learned sessions court below in order to file a discharge application. So a discharge application is also something you can read about. A discharge application is when you approach the learned court below, which is filed once the investigating officer files a charge sheet. Correct? So once the charge sheet is filed, well, even after the charge sheet is filed, you can prefer a quashing petition before the Honorable High Court. But some judges, some learned judges have a view that once charge sheet is filed, there is preliminary investigation, which is thorough investigation has been conducted, and there is material or there's evidence against the accused. So now you go prefer a discharge application. So instead of rejecting the quashing petition, they give you liberty. You can always withdraw your petition for quashing before the High Court and go before the learned court below and prefer a discharge application, which will then either be allowed or rejected. And then there is appeal, then there is revision or whatever there is. So these are the gray areas. Now, more commonly, I've been practicing from 3 years now, and I have seen that the highest number of cases that come for quashing, there's a rising trend in commercial disputes where there is money involved. So, for example, landlord tenants, or there's an agreement or there's a contract between two people, and basically there is something to do with recovery of money. One person needs to recover money from the other side, and for recovery of money, you can always prefer a civil suit, recovery for money suit before the learned courts below. But as we all know, that takes a lot of time, years to be very precise, and that is at the before the lower courts, which is always subject to appeal and revision. You can always go back to the district court followed by the High Court, which is then doesn't attain finality until it goes to the Honorable Apex Court, the Supreme Court. So we are easily looking at 15 to 20 years at the bare minimum. So people find out ways to circumvent civil litigation, and what they do is by influence of anything is possible in this country. All you need to do is find the right amount that you're ready to pay, and you get an FIR registered against the person who owes you money. So thereby giving it a criminal angle. So basically the matter is purely a civil dispute. Recovery of money, purely a civil dispute. But you bring in one or two elements, one or two fringe elements, and give it a criminal color. An FIR is registered. So usually it is 420, criminal breach of trust. Then there is, especially in Gujarat, there's a tendency to put 5062, which is not bailable. Correct? You can read up these sections. I'm not going to tell you what these sections are. So, as a result, the FIR is registered and the police has the power to arrest. So then people approach the courts for quashing. So in one case wherein I appeared, a Delhi-based company had on the lines of OYO, right? It's like an OYO or an Airbnb. But the only point being, they don't give their premises to people like you and me. They give it to students to live there. So they run PGs, if you would like to put it that way.
So sorry, just getting a call. Yeah. So they run PGs, and so they take buildings from people in Gujarat and different states. It's an international brand in Singapore and other countries as well. So at least in Ahmedabad, in the case where I had the opportunity to appear, they signed a contract there was an agreement, there was a lease deed. Sorry, there was a lease deed, and so I represented the individual who was a businessman from Ahmedabad who had interests in real estate. He had 3 or 4 commercial properties in Ahmedabad. So this company took all 3 properties for him, and it was agreed that every month they will pay a rental of 5 lakh for each property, 15 lakhs in all. And then they would in turn let out the rooms to students and collect rent from the students. So it went on for 2 or 3 months, and then the project was not feasible. They were not making the desired amount of profits which they had estimated, and things were getting out of hand, and they started defaulting on these rentals. So we told them, you pay up or you leave. But there was a lock-in also. There was a lock-in of 3 years, lock-in period for 3 years. And as a result of which we entered negotiations which failed. They invoked a notice. They sent us a notice invoking arbitration. Correct? Now the lease deed had a clause, had an arbitration clause, which was valid, which was proper. And rightly so, they sent us a notice invoking arbitration. We were about to respond to that. Meanwhile, they got an FIR registered against us, which is after them having invoked the a notice invoking arbitration, right? For the same sections which I told you earlier, 420, 5062, and put into 3 sections more. Not only against this businessman whom I represent, but against his entire family, his children, his wife, his mother, who was 84 years old, who is 84 years old. And this is to exert pressure on this individual, right? So it is like abetment to suicide, wherein we had seen of a domestic violence, where we've seen that the entire family is roped in as an accused in the FIR. So then that is what they did, and we filed a counter FIR, and it took us time to get it registered because the investigating agency was already compromised. So their integrity was compromised. So it took us time, but that was registered. So immediately we were first in time to approach the High Court. There was a stay on our FIR wherein we clearly showed that, see, look, on one hand, the first informant sends us a notice invoking arbitration, and so they themselves agree that there is an alternative remedy to recover money. Finally, it's about money because they had a counterclaim against us. They said that we owe them some money. So you invoke arbitration and then you file an FIR. This is nothing but abuse of process. And so we got a stay. We were protected. And basis our order, they also came in the connected matter, in the first information report that my client filed against them, and that even they were protected. And both of them are now being tagged and heard together. So this is what we see. There is a growing trend where people want to circumvent the process. So in civil matters, if the remedy is to approach the courts below by filing an FIR, you try to arm twist the accused in the FIR to do whatever it is that you or he wants from that person. Because let's face it, and let's be honest. Every person is afraid to spend a night in prison, right? In jail, is afraid to spend a night in police lockup, is afraid with the social stigma that is attached in the society, a social stigma that an FIR exists against you, your image in the society. Newspapers report such happenings or such first information reports, and overall, it is just a sorry state of affairs. It also you also face problems when you try to apply for a visa, or when you have to mention if there are any prosecutions, any cases going on against you. So caution petitions would lie when it is the issue is primarily civil in nature, or whatever wrong has been done to a person, the remedy is purely civil in nature. Despite it being civil, if criminal action is initiated, a caution petition would lie. Again, there are a category of judgments on this. You can easily Google it out, and both by the High Court and by the Honorable Supreme Court. Then we have cases where there is a family dispute between brothers, dispute between husband and wife, dispute between children and their parents. Again, even in these matters, the courts are usually inclined to allow a quashing petition because matter is between two people and it has now been settled. So what is the harm? Why should there be a waste of public resources when the matter proceeds with trial? Because the learned public prosecutor appears, judges who can spend their time dealing with other important cases are now looking into cases which have already been settled. So that trial is frustrated. There's no point. So the courts have a tendency to quash such proceedings. And the other cases, as I told you, there's something called as a consent quashing, where the complainant files an affidavit saying that he or she has settled it with the accused person in the FIR, and hence he has no objection if the court quashes the FIR. But again, there is no mandate by the court. The judges are not bound by such an affidavit. The government, the the assistant public prosecutor, the APP, who represents the state, or the PP can always object, saying that this affidavit has been filed by coercion or by duress or involuntarily or whatever it is, or that will send out a wrong message to the society at large. And so the courts are not bound. They can always reject, or they can always refuse to adhere to the contents of that affidavit which has been filed by the complainant. So again, this is not binding. So that is what it is, quashing. Very fascinating area to practice, very interesting. Okay, lastly, I'm so sorry. There's one more case before I would like to conclude, which is very interesting. I just filed it recently, and this is where, okay, so even notice has not been issued. It is due, it is ripe for hearing. So let's not talk about it. There's no point. It is again my view. If this video was being shot after a week or 10 days, I could have spoken on that case. Alokik, is there anything you'd like to add or ask me?
Yeah,
You want me to elaborate on something?
Yeah,
Anything which is
I
not
just,
clear?
yeah, is my voice audible? Hello,
Yes, I'm not able to hear you. I'm so sorry.
am I audible now?
Just a second.
Hello.
Just a second.
Tell me.
Yeah, am I audible now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
Please
there are
go
just
on.
two quick follow-up questions that I wanted to ask, because I've seen that it is the most common questions asked by students in various classes of criminal laws that I've dealt with. First would be, what is the correct stage of filing this application of quashing of an FIR? So is it immediately after quashing, immediately after the FIR is registered, or is it after when the charge sheet is completely filed? That is the first question I want to ask. I just want a quick 2 to 3 minute response to it. So yeah, if you will proceed on it, I'll ask the second question afterwards, after you respond to this one. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. Please.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I completely lost what you were saying. I heard the first question. What is it that you said after that?
Just the first question. I just want a 2 to 3 minute quick response on the fact as to what is the proper stage of filing an application of quashing.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Hello. Yeah, so usually what we see is, and what I advise is, as soon as the FIR is registered, or as soon as you get knowledge of the fact that a first information report has been registered, if you genuinely feel, you can always take advice from a lawyer that there's no offense, you've not done anything. So, for example, the best thing to discuss right now would be alibi, or defense of alibi. You've been named in an FIR. wherein you've been suspected of murder, but you say, hello, on that day I was in Dubai. I was not in India. Your passport, you can show that the stamp of the immigration when you exited the country. There's no question of me facing trial. I'm completely innocent. I was not there in India. So we all know what alibi is. I don't need to explain what alibi is. So you immediately move the before the High Court, and relief is always granted more often than not. So the best defense, the best possible defense in a criminal matter is the defense of alibi.
Yeah.
But coming back, as soon as an FIR is registered, the faster you can approach a court for quashing, the better. Because as I told you, there are some judges who have a view that once the charge sheet is filed, 60 days or 90 days, depending on what the offense is. So that means there is not prima facie, after thorough investigation, material has been collected by the investigating officer, the IO, and he has come to the conclusion that person X, Y, or Z is indeed guilty of an offense. And that is why charge sheet is filed. Correct? So because if there was nothing which was found, so again, charge sheet is very important, because if after complete investigation, after thorough investigation, if the investigating officer finds out that there's nothing against the person in the FIR who's an accused, then he or she either files a summary report, a closure report, a B summary or a C summary. Correct? So
Yeah.
if a charge sheet is filed, then there are some judges who are of the view that who would not entertain a quashing petition. They would not reject the petition as well, but they would always give you liberty to file a discharge application before the courts below, before the sessions court. So what is a discharge application? Similar to a quashing petition, but you approach the court below. That's it. And why is it that I say that immediately you must approach? So time is of essence over here. For example, in these offenses which I spoke about, of a lease deed which was entered into between my client and a Delhi-based company, as soon as the FIR is filed, so I told you, right, that the FIR was filed for extraneous reasons. The investigating agency was paid off by the complainant. The first informant paid money and got the FIR registered. So we already know, we are aware that the investigating officer, his integrity is compromised. He or she has no embargo to not arrest my client. So my client can be arrested. So if I decide to prefer an anticipatory bail application before the learned court below, that is going to take time. We're looking at least 3 to 4 days, 4 to 5 days. So, and again, you're not really confident whether you will get relief against arrest by preferring the anticipatory bail application. So the faster you approach the court, more often than not, they give a stay. So in Gujarat, they say no coercive action to be taken against the petitioner. Then either they may stay the investigation or they may permit the investigation to go on. But it's fine, right? Your clients are protected from arrest. So that is one way of going about it. But as far as the correct position in law is concerned, there is no particular stage. To the best of my knowledge, even after charge sheet, even when trial commences, you can always approach a writ court, because you're filing a writ petition under 226 and 482. As a matter of practice, judges may or may not entertain quashing petitions after a particular stage. But in law and in judgments, I studied about this, I've read about this 6 or 7 months ago, but there are some complications. Some courts have taken an approach that once charge is framed, not charge sheet, once charge is framed, then one may not entertain. Or, for example, evidence is being led by the prosecution or by defense, then one may not permit. But I think there is a Supreme Court judgment which says at any stage you can prefer a quashing petition. But this needs to be verified, subject to correction. This is all subject to correction. I've only had 3 years of experience.
Thank you. Yeah, as far as the theoretical framework goes about quashing, you're absolutely correct. So stage of quashing as such theoretically is not determined. It can be even when the evidence is led by the prosecution or by the defense at any matter of time, at any matter of the trial, whenever it is sufficiently clear that there is absolutely no point in going further with the trial as such, so a quashing application can be preferred. So theoretically, yes, you are correct, but I just wanted to know the practical perspective of it, the how different judges basically approach the same theoretical framework. And thanks a lot for responding to that. My
Thank you,
second,
Alok. Even I am clear now. But in sum and substance, in a line,
yeah,
if I were to again answer, it is always better to immediately file a quashing petition for the simple reason. Once charge sheet is filed, even a discharge application will lie before the court below, right? So if a charge sheet is not filed, you cannot file a discharge application now. So
yeah,
then
correct,
some judges may get a reason to send you to the court below, saying that now the charge sheet has been filed, you have a remedy in law, you have an alternative remedy in law, so you avail that remedy. So to avoid that, it is better that you immediately move the writ court with a quashing petition.
absolutely, absolutely.
Well, you can
This,
also directly go to the Supreme Court as well. So very recently, we've seen Arnab Goswami, who preferred the quashing petition directly before the apex court. He was
yeah,
given protection as well. He was protected initially, but then the division bench comprising of Honorable Justice Chandrachud and Justice M.R. Shah clearly stated that they dismissed the petition on the grounds that he was given liberty to approach the appropriate court, which would be the High Court, and
yeah,
avail of remedies. Because then that hierarchy is again, every person would then directly approach the apex court, right? That is what it
correct.
is. Yeah.
The second follow-up question that I wanted to ask, I just want a 2 or 3 minute response to that. How do you see quashing vis-a-vis serious criminal offenses? So are judges really receptive to quashing application when it comes to serious crimes that are levied against the accused?
Correct. So again, there's nothing more serious that comes to my mind than murder,
Yeah,
302, or rape for that matter. So we've already discussed about rape. Speaking about murder, so what is important is, in a quashing petition, advocates start with the FIR. You start reading the FIR. What is the allegation against you? As I said, that there is an alibi. So it doesn't matter whether it is 302 or any other heinous offense, dacoity, robbery, whatever it is. A plea of alibi can always, you were not there, you were not there, you were just not there.
yeah,
That petition is bound to be allowed more often than not. So the role is seen, primarily the role is seen, and if there is any doubt in the mind of the judge, or if the judge is not convinced enough, what is the approach which is usually taken is, they protect the petitioner from arrest, but they say, let investigation continue. So what the judge tells you is, it is your case that you were not present at the scene of the offense, right? Fair enough. I'm passing an order protecting you from arrest. Let the police investigate. The police will take your statement. The investigating officer will take your statement. At that time, you put your defense before him. Give your statement that I was not there. Corroborate it with your tickets, hotel receipts, whatever it is. Show where you actually were. And if the investigating officer is convinced, he wouldn't file a charge sheet against you. So sometimes the High Court, while passing an order in the caution matter, while protecting you from arrest, they would also say the investigating officer may be permitted to continue with investigation. However, the charge sheet may be filed by the investigating officer only after approval from this court. That is the court which has passed that order. So that is a check and balance. So even if the first informant is in collusion with the investigating officer and he prepares a draft charge sheet, even then the learned judge, the High Court judge, can have a look at that draft charge sheet and then apply his mind whether there is sufficient material available against the petition, and then either allow or reject the caution petition. So that is what it is. So the seriousness of the offense doesn't matter. If you are innocent, if there's no role attributed to you, or if it is a counter blast. So for example, the first informant and you you've had a relationship wherein in the past you have initiated an FIR against them, and this is only a counter blast. So even in those situations, the courts are always vigilant and they look into the intention. So it is all very subjective. There is, if you ask me for a simple answer in black and white, it is difficult to. Again, coming back to that example, which I find is very important, of rape, wherein in one case the complaint,
Yeah.
the victim preferred an affidavit saying that I wish to get married with this man who is the accused person in the FIR. The court was pleased to quash the FIR. But same set of facts, the judge said, no, I'm not inclined. That may be that you wish to get married with the person accused, but that doesn't absolve you from the fact that you did actually commit an offense, right? So that there the caution petition was rejected. So it is but obvious that in trial that person must have been acquitted. I didn't follow that up. So that is what it is. Seriousness of the offense doesn't matter.
Thank you, Ronit Bhai, for such an engaging session. I must say that the perspectives that we got today, that is something that we really cannot understand and comprehend whenever we are engaged in a classroom discussion. So some of the perspectives of the courtroom that you have brought in today, I think it will seriously help all the students of law, which basically wants to engage into a kind of education, which is a mixture of both courtroom plus classroom discussion. Thank you yet again, and I'll see you next time.
These perspectives can come only once you enter active practice. Even you have practiced for a couple of years before the High Court. So you're aware, no matter how hard you try in law school, some facets of the law you will have clarity on. You have a theoretical understanding. Like we said, that even if an offense is read in its entirety and no offense is made out, an FIR is read in its entirety and no offense is made out, then a quashing petition would lie. So in theory, you always knew what Bhajan Lal was trying to say. Through Bhajan Lal, what the Honorable Supreme Court was trying to say. But when you start practicing and you see these events taking place on a day-to-day basis, you realize, okay, this is what it is. This is how it comes into play, and this is what that judgment meant. That's how it is. So my suggestion to all the viewers is, especially on the criminal side, quashing is a good area worth considering. If you practice on the criminal side, you'll always get quashing matters. It's fun, it's interesting. And the real temperament of a lawyer, I personally believe, comes out on the criminal side. The temperament. What is it that you say? What is it that you don't say? Anyways, we are digressing. I get too excited.
No, correct. You are absolutely correct. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you, Ronit Bhai, for joining in today. I think it was a very enriching session for all the viewers.
Sure, Alokik. I hope people can take something from this video.
I'm absolutely sure they will. Absolutely sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Alokik. I'm grateful. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.